Well, it is a beautiful, almost spring day. Rob is dressed for the occasion. It's also National Sourdough Bread Day, and it's one of the world's oldest leavened breads. Today, it's still about celebrating the delicious creation, which we will talk about here in just a moment. But who better to join us than Rob? You're the owner of Breadsmith. So excited because I love breads. I also love Breadsmith.
Thank you.
So
Thank
shout
you.
out there. But sourdough bread is a unique creation.
Correct.
You were briefly giving me kind of an idea of how this process works. So if you could explain for our friends at home, what does the process look like for making sourdough bread?
One of the unique things about sourdough is it doesn't have any commercial yeast in it. So to start your starter, like ours was started back in '93, basically just take flour and water, put it out in the woods, and it'll slowly start to bubble as it's collecting the wild yeast. There's a couple different ways to start it, but it never has a commercial yeast. So some people look at the ingredients as flour, water, salt, and starter, and they'll say, well, it doesn't have any yeast in it. No, it is. If it didn't have yeast, it wouldn't rise.
Right.
The hallmark of a good sourdough is a healthy crust. So here we've got 3 different ones. So this is a cheese bread we made for sourdough. These two are both actually the same weight, but the shape is different, and you're gonna find different things. This one is sort of like me as I stand in front of you. You know, I'm kind of a fat guy. You know, I kind of, I'm cute, I'm cuddly, but I'm not all compressed. You put me in a girdle, and all of a sudden, ooh, a little more tight on the inside.
Wearing my outfits, yeah.
It works for men. So which one do you want me to cut into first of all?
Honestly, I love the round one. Like,
let's go for that.
I love the shape that you kind of cut into it and just made it. Oh, listen to that.
Well, like
that crunch is unbelievable.
Well, one of the hallmarks of a good sourdough is a great crust.
You can hear it. That's what I love too.
Here's
is you can
you.
hear that crust.
Now smell it first. And if you notice on the inside, these are called ovules. And those are the little air holes in there, and that comes from the fermentation process. Every bread does it. Some do bigger, like a ciabatta gets bigger, airier ones. Some are tighter, like like a hamburger bun has a very tight ovule. But that smell is what sets it apart. And that comes from lactic acid. And one of the things why historically people like sourdough so much is it's a natural way of preserving bread. So it'll have a longer shelf life.
Yeah.
And you've heard the San Francisco 49ers, not the football, but the Miners. They used to carry little pouches of sourdough with them, so when they set up a new camp, they could start growing the rest of their sourdough again.
Oh, that is interesting. Okay, so I do want to show you at home, in case you weren't able to see it before. So this is the starter, which basically looks like, when you're going to start making bread, you put it together and you let it rise.
Oh, let's have a little fun.
That looks like.
Grab some with your finger.
Okay, here, I'm going to take my rings off, because we always make a mess. Okay.
Now try and get it off your fingers. It's extremely sticky.
So I took the rings off. Yeah, it is. It's so sticky. I think it's. So I want to make sure I understand this process. You mentioned lactic acid, and I'm thinking, like, from my perspective of having a 9-year-old, you do the volcano with the baking soda and the vinegar, and it creates those bubbles. So it's kind of the same type of reaction inside the dough. Okay.
Similar, obviously different. I mean, you're not getting the volume of bubbles out of this, but that's exactly right.
And it's interesting because it does smell like fermentation. It's like what you would expect, almost a beer smell, because they both use yeast, they both use the grain. So,
but they don't use a natural yeast. Whereas we're working using the same yeast strain that started in '93.
That is fascinating. So you just keep that going, huh?
We feed it 7 days a week. If we didn't, we didn't used to feed it on Sundays, but on Mondays it wouldn't rise that fast because it was. What happens is it'll start consuming itself after a while. And that's the smell you're getting. The more it consumes itself, the more sour, more stinky it gets. So it definitely has a great funk to it. It
does have a funk to it. I can vouch for that.
It's good stuff.
It is, but gosh, and I love sourdough bread because I do love that sour flavor. Traditional bread, wonderful as well, but the sourdough just has kind of a unique flavor I enjoy. And so for this one over here, I'll try to do my best pointing. I'm definitely stuck together now. You've got some cheese and you've got jalapenos.
Yep.
Which love. I absolutely love that, especially when you're adding different things to the breads to kind of enhance the flavor. Do you have any other flavors of sourdough?
Oh, sourdough rye, country sourdough. The sourdough rye we're doing a little bit more and more. The country sourdough happens on Mondays periodically. But you can see in this, notice the swirls inside.
Wow.
So we actually push out flat, then we top it with the cheese. Here. Try it a little bit.
I won't.
Don't worry if you get sourdough starter in your sourdough. It won't hurt a thing. So, this show was brought to you by Breadsmith.
Right, pretty much. No, what I love about it is you get that wonderful sourdough flavor and then you get the cheese. But for me, it's the pop of the jalapeno because you get that little bit of bite that really enhances the sourness in an interesting way.
We also try and balance it out because there's nothing worse. I used to have a guy who didn't measure it, and one day it was just horrible. So that night I came in, I said, here, try this. He goes, why? I said, just try it. Yeah, you could see the tears coming to his eyes.
Oh,
that's why we measure.
Bread changes lives, people.
We do our best.
Go on over to Breadsmith, get yourself some sourdough. It is National Sourdough Bread Day. Thank you again, Rob, for coming on the show.
My pleasure.
It is just always a delight.
Well, thanks
just
for
love
having me.
having you on here. Of course. Stay with us. Coming up on North Dakota today, a show's coming to Fargo Theater. It will leave you nostalgic for the good old days of hanging out in the church.